Garrett had been running Appalachian freight for 9 years, mostly the corridor between Charleston, West Virginia and Roanoke. And he'll tell you the first rule of these mountains before he tells you anything else. The interstate is a promise, and the old roads are a negotiation. You stay on the interstate at night. Everybody stays on the interstate at night. This is the story of the one night Garrett didn't, is that he has physical proof of where he ended up, and the proof is impossible, and he keeps it in a sandwich bag in his glove box to this day. It was a Tuesday in late September, a little past 2 in the morning, and Garrett was southbound with a load of pipe fittings when the interstate quit on him. Brake lights out of nowhere, a full stop, and then the slow news filtering up the CB. A coal truck had lost its load across both lanes at the bottom of a grade, and the cleanup was hours out. And there, glowing in his headlights on the shoulder, stood a portable sign with an arrow. Detour. The detour route peeled off at the next exit onto a state road, and the state road was fine for a while. Curvy but honest. Reflectors where they should be. Then his GPS lost the satellites, which happens in the hollows, and bothered him not at all, and the detour signs kept coming, small orange arrows at every fork, leading him down and down, off the ridge into a valley that got deeper and closer on both sides, until the trees met over the road in places, and his headlights ran down a green tunnel. 20 minutes in, he passed a road sign, old white letters on green, pocked with rust. Marrow Hollow. Unink. Garrett had run that corridor 9 years and never heard of it, which meant nothing, because these mountains hide 100 towns like that. What stopped his breath was cresting the last low rise and seeing the town itself, because at 2:30 in the morning, Marrow Hollow was awake. Porch lights burned down both sides of the road. Windows glowed yellow, dozens of them, a whole valley floor of lit houses stitched along the creek bottom, and Garrett's first feeling was plain relief, because a lit town is a friendly thing on a lost night. It took him most of a quarter mile to understand what was wrong with it, and he says the understanding arrived in his body before his brain, a cold crawl up the back of his neck, while his eyes were still calling the scene pretty. The people were out. In yards, on porches, standing along the shoulder at the edge of the road, in the grass, at 2:30 in the morning, in what looked like Sunday clothes, and every single one of them was standing still, and every single one of them was facing the road, facing him. An old man at a gate with his hat in his hands. A woman on a porch with 2 children stood in front of her, her hands resting on their shoulders. A whole family arranged in a line along a fence, oldest to youngest, like a photograph waiting to be taken. Garrett slowed to a crawl, because his headlights kept finding more of them, house after house, and nobody waved, and nobody moved, and their faces followed his cab, with the smooth, slow turn of sunflowers tracking light. He wants to be exact about the fear, because it wasn't the fear of threat. Nobody stepped toward the truck. It was the fear of arithmetic. Some assembly was being held that he had driven into the middle of, and every still face said that the town knew something about this road tonight that he didn't, and the deepest animal part of him began to whisper that the something was him. He did not stop. He rolled through Marrow Hollow at 15 miles an hour, past the lit church with its doors standing open onto a glowing, empty sanctuary, past a general store with a man behind the counter watching him through the window, and as the houses thinned at the far end of town, his mirrors showed him the entire population of Marrow Hollow turning, all together, unhurried, to face his taillights. The last thing he passed was the graveyard, up on the hillside above the road, and Garrett swears to this day that the graveyard was the one dark place in that whole valley, and that he could see small lights moving in it, low to the ground, weaving slow among the stones, dozens of them, like lanterns being carried by people the height of children. Then the trees closed over the road again, and 20 endless minutes later, the detour arrows delivered him back to the interstate like nothing had happened, and Garrett drove to the first travel center with lights and people and sat in the parking lot until his hands worked. Here's where the story turns, because Garrett is a methodical man, and by daylight he'd half convinced himself he'd rolled through some strange little church community keeping a night vigil, a funeral custom, mountain people doing mountain things. Odd, but human. He wanted the name for his logbook note, so at the counter he asked the cashier, a local woman in her 60s, how far back up the road Marrow Hollow was. The woman stopped counting his change. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said, "Honey, Marrow Hollow's not up any road. Marrow Hollow's under the lake. The state dammed that valley in 1961, flooded the whole town for a reservoir, the church, the store, the houses, over the protest of every family in it, and the families were moved out and scattered. And the graveyard," she said, and here she lowered her voice the way people do when a story has a sore spot. "The graveyard, they were supposed to move first, and the money ran short, and the water didn't wait. Marrow Hollow has been at the bottom of 40 feet of lake for 65 years. There is no road through it. There is no road to it." Garrett stood at that counter and felt the night reorganize itself around one memory. The whole valley lit and waiting. Every face turned to the road. The one dark place, the hillside graveyard, above the waterline of a town that drowned, and the small lights moving among the stones. He walked out to his truck in the September morning and did his walk around on shaking legs, and that's when he found the proof. And this is what lives in the sandwich bag in his glove box. Woven through his mud flaps and wrapped in the rear axles, drying in the sun, were long green ropes of lakeweed, coontail and pondweed, the boat shop man told him later, turning it over in his hands, asking Garrett what ramp he'd back down. "Fresh," the man said, "cut fresh that night." Garrett hadn't been within a quarter mile of open water. He'd driven 40 miles of dry September road, through a lit town full of still people in their Sunday best, every one of them facing the road, and he understands now what the arithmetic was, the thing the town knew that he didn't, and it wasn't about him at all. They weren't warning him. They weren't threatening him. 65 years under the lake, and one night a road opened through town the way it used to, and headlights came down it the way they used to. They'd all come out to watch somebody pass through. Garrett still runs that corridor. When a detour sign pulls him off the interstate at night, he follows the arrows like anybody. But he'll tell you the rule he keeps now, the one he'd give any driver in these mountains. And he gives it in the tone of a man who's earned it. If the detour takes you somewhere lit, somewhere awake, somewhere where the people stand still and watch you pass at 2:30 in the morning, you keep rolling, and you be polite about it. Don't honk, don't wave, and whatever you feel on the back of your neck, don't stop. Some towns only get visitors once every 60 years. You don't want to find out how badly they'd like you to stay. Before the interstates, Appalachian road builders had one answer for a mountain they couldn't climb, and the answer was dynamite. The old tunnels are still down there on the secondary routes, bored straight through the hearts of ridges a century ago, 1.5 lanes wide, black as a throat, and every one of them has its local customs. Honk before you enter, never stop inside. And at the Ewell Tunnel, on a forgotten state route in eastern Kentucky, the custom the old drivers keep is the strangest one of all. Before they go in, they check their watch, and they say the time out loud. Hollis learned why on a February night, and what makes his story different from every other story in this video is that Hollis has it on video, all of it, and by the end, you're going to understand why he has never watched the file to the end, and why he never will. Hollis was a regional driver, born 2 counties from the tunnel, and he'd been through the Ewell maybe 300 times. It's a 40-second tunnel, that's the whole fact of it. At a lawful crawl, entrance to exit, 40 seconds of rock, a slight bend in the middle, where for one moment you can see neither end, and then the winter sky again. He knew its dripping spots and its one dead light, and the joke about holding your breath. That February night he came up on the Ewell at 11:52. Empty road, hard cold, his dashcam running the way it always ran, and out of 300 trip habit, he did what his grandfather's generation of drivers did. He glanced at the dash clock, said 11:52 out loud to his empty cab, and rolled in. The first wrong thing was the radio. He had a Huntington AM station on low, a call-in show, and Tunnel's Eat AM radio. Everybody knows that. You get the hiss, and you get the station back on the far side. The hiss came, and then, inside the hiss, another station rose up, faint and warbling. A man's voice reading names. Just names, slow and formal. Name after name after name. In an accent Hollis knew his whole life. The old, deep hollow accent his great-uncles had. An accent that mostly went into the ground with them. He reached to touch the dial and didn't, because the second wrong thing had arrived. The bend in the middle of the tunnel wasn't coming. 40 seconds is 40 seconds. His body knew the count, the way your body knows your own staircase in the dark, and the count came and went, and rock kept unrolling in his high beams. A minute, the radio read its names. 2 minutes, and Hollis's hands were sweating on the wheel of a truck doing a steady 30 down a dead straight bore that had no straight sections, and he made the decision drivers make, the only one available at 30 miles an hour inside a mountain. He kept rolling, and he watched the odometer, and the odometer is what broke him, because the Ewell Tunnel is 0.6 of a mile long, and he watched his own odometer turn over 2 full miles of tunnel, then 3, the same dripping walls, the same dead light, and he began to understand that the dead light was the same dead light, arriving again and again, the way scenery arrives in an old cartoon. The radio finished its names. There was a pause, a long breath of hiss, and then it read his, full name, middle name and all, in the old accent, unhurried, one name in a list, and it went on to the next name, and the next, and Hollis stopped being a driver for a second, and became only a body, cold all over, doing 30 into the dark. His phone had no bars. His CB gave back a sound he'd never heard from it, a slow, deep, rhythmic sound, less like static than like breathing with gravel in it. And far ahead, at the edge of his high beams, right where the light failed into black, something stood at the tunnel wall. He never got closer to it. That's the mercy of this story, and Hollis knows it's a mercy. 3 miles. 4. The shape stayed exactly at the edge of the light, as if the light itself carried it along, a tall, thin darkness against the dark. And the only change, and he gets quiet when he says this, the only change was that every time the dead light strobed past overhead, the shape stood a little more turned toward him than before. It began in profile. By the time the tunnel ended, it had come fully around. He can't tell you what the face was. He can tell you it was patient. The end came the way the wrong beginning came, with no seam. 1 second, rock and the shape at the light's edge. The next, the bend, the true bend, and the winter sky opening up ahead, and the AM station from Huntington chattering brightly about basketball, and Hollis rolled out of the Ewell Tunnel doing 30, with tears on his face he had no memory of producing. His dash clock said 11:53, 40 seconds. Entrance to exit. He pulled over on the far apron and sat, and the world sat with him, ordinary as bread. He'd have carried it as a private haunting, a hard story to tell at Fuel Islands, except for the 2 records. And the records are why his story spread through that corridor the way it did. His dispatcher called the next morning, irritated, asking where he'd been between 11:52 and 2:47, because the truck's GPS unit had gone dark for 2 hours and 55 minutes, no pings, a hole in the night, and it had gone dark at the western mouth of the Ewell Tunnel and come back at the eastern mouth. 60 seconds of clock time on his dash. 3 hours missing from the sky's point of view. And then there was the dash cam. The file from that night should have been a minute long. Tunnel entry to tunnel exit. The file is 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 11 seconds long. Hollis watched the first minute. It shows the entry, the dripping walls, the dead light passing once, twice, and then the image simply stops advancing. One still frame of empty tunnel held on the screen. Timestamp frozen, and he scrubbed forward. 10 minutes, 40, an hour. The same frozen frame, and he'd nearly written the whole file off as corrupted when he noticed. At around the 90-minute mark, the thing every person who has ever watched a copy of that file notices. Frame by frame, hour by hour, at the far edge of the frozen image, at the exact rim of the headlight's reach, the darkness has begun to include a shape, and the shape, across those hours in which nothing else in the image moves, not the drips, not the dust in the beams, is very slowly getting larger, coming up the tunnel toward the camera, toward the truck that, according to the frame, is standing still with its lights on, in a tunnel for 3 hours, while something walks the whole long way in. Hollis stopped the file at the 2-hour mark and has never opened it again. He knows how it ends. He was there for the last frame of it, doing 30 with tears on his face. What he cannot make himself watch is the arrival, the minutes where the shape reaches the hood and the lens, and whatever the camera saw up close in the time his clock never recorded. He drives a different route now, over the ridge, 20 minutes longer, and he'll pay those 20 minutes every night of his life without complaint. But he kept his grandfather's custom, and he'll teach it to you, the way it was taught to him, in case your road ever runs through the old rock. Before you enter a tunnel in these mountains, look at your clock and say the time out loud. It isn't superstition, it's a receipt. It's how you prove, afterward, how much was taken. Look. There are night jobs on the highway that nobody thinks about, and the loneliest one is flagging. One human being in a reflective vest, holding a pole sign that says slow on one face and stop on the other, standing in the dark to meter traffic past the cone line. Drivers barely see them, that's the job, being barely seen, all night, inches from 40 tons rolling past. Lena had been driving for 6 years when she met the flagger on Corbin Gap, and I'll tell you now what makes this one worth your full attention. Of the 6 stories tonight, this is the only one where the driver still doesn't know whether she was saved that night or selected, and neither will you. And the not knowing is the story. Every driver who runs that gap carries the same question now. You're about to carry it too. Corbin Gap is a 2-lane crossing in southwest Virginia, a long climb and a long fall over a shoulder of Clinch Mountain. Cliffs going up on one side and dropping off the other, the kind of road that gets a guardrail memorial every few years. Lena crossed it maybe twice a month, and on a moonless October night, a little after 1, she came around a cut near the summit and found the work zone. It was small, a single row of cones pinching the road to one lane, 2 amber barricade lights, and a flagger standing at the near end, with the pole sign turned to stop. Lena braked down and stopped, first in a line of nobody, her headlights making a bright island around the flagger, and settled in to wait for the pilot car or the oncoming traffic that the closure was protecting. The flagger was a woman, middle-aged, hard-weathered, gray hair drawn back under her hard hat, vest hanging loose on her, and she stood with the pole planted like a soldier at rest, facing Lena's truck. Lena did what you do, lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in the universal hello. The woman didn't move. Fine, it's 1 in the morning, nobody's friendly. The first 5 minutes were normal. It was in the second 5 that Lena started noticing the wrongness in layers, the way you notice a picture is hung crooked before you notice the wall is cracked. There was no work. Beyond the cones, her high beams showed empty road, no equipment, no crew, no cut pavement, no pilot car idling. There was no oncoming traffic, none. Not one set of lights in 10 minutes, on a road that closure was supposedly metering. There was no company truck for the flagger herself, no generator, nothing but the woman, the sign, and 2 amber lights blinking out of sync. And the woman's eyes were closed. Lena was 30 feet away in full headlight, and she was sure of it. The flagger stood facing her, chin slightly lifted, perfectly balanced on the pole, and her eyes were closed, and they stayed closed, minute after minute, the lids smooth and untroubled, the face of a woman deep in something that was either sleep or prayer or listening. Lena sat in her idling truck on a black mountain with her doors locked, watching a closed-eyed woman hold a stop sign against no traffic, protecting no work, and every practical option ran through her head and died there. Drive around her, through the cones, past a legal sign, on a blind 1-lane pinch. Get out and talk to her. Lena looked at the closed eyes and found that the idea of the eyes opening while she stood next to the woman was, for reasons she could not name, the single worst idea her mind had ever produced. So she waited. 22 minutes by the dash clock, alone, the amber lights blinking, the woman never shifting her weight. And Lena will tell you the strangest part was the quality of the silence. The mountain holding its breath around that little island of light. No wind, no bugs, nothing moving anywhere in the world, except 2 out-of-sync ambers. And since we're stopped on this mountain with her for a minute anyway, one quick thing. If these stories are doing their work on you, the subscribe button is 1 tap, and it's free, and it means the next load of them finds you on its own. Out here, drivers look out for each other. That's all this channel has ever been. Anyway, minute 22. At minute 22, with no cue Lena ever identified, no radio call, no passing car, the flagger moved. One smooth, practiced motion, the pole rotating in her hands, stop swinging away and the scission. Slow swinging toward, and then the woman turned her head, eyes still closed, and tilted it, in the manner of an usher, toward the open lane. Lena rolled. What else was there? She eased through the cone pinch at 10 miles an hour, and as her window drew level with the flagger, she made herself look, because 6 years of driving had taught her that you regret the things you don't look at more than the things you do. And this is the image Lena keeps, the one she'll carry to her grave. The woman's face, close enough to touch, serene under the hard hat, eyes closed like a woman in a casket, and stitched across the back of her vest, where a contractor's name belongs, in letters that had once been reflective and had gone gray, 3 words, Wallen and Sons, and under it, smaller, funeral services. Then the cones were behind her, and the ambers, and the mountain let its breath out, and Lena descended the far side of Corbin Gap with her hands at 10 and 2, like a student driver, and nothing else happened that night. That's the truth of it, nothing else happened at all. The rock slide came down at 4:20 that morning. She heard it on the CB at breakfast and drove back the next week to look, like half the county did. A quarter mile past where the cones had stood, the mountain had shed a piece of itself across both lanes, 60 feet of cliff face, boulders the size of sheds, and the state's geologist told the paper it had let go all at once, no warning, in the dead of night. The road was closed a month. Lena did her own arithmetic 100 times, and it always came out the same. Without the 22 minutes, her timeline put her under that cliff, inside a window of about 4 minutes, one direction or the other. So there it is, you're thinking. A guardian, a dead flagger from some old wreck on that gap, holding back the living until the mountain finishes falling. Lena thought so too, wanted to think so, and she started asking, the careful sideways way, at the truck stop at the foot of the gap. And an old hand named Merle, who'd run that road since the 70s, heard her whole story with no surprise on his face at all, and then took his coffee cup down from his mouth and corrected her theory with one question. He asked, were her eyes open or shut? "Shut," Lena said. "The whole time." Merle nodded, slow, and said, "Then you were all right. She's held me twice over the years. Shut both times." And Lena, feeling the floor of the story move under her, asked the question you're asking. What does it mean if they're open? Merle looked into his coffee for a while. Then he said, "My cousin Dale Ray got stopped by her in 1988. Up top, middle of a clear, dry night. Line of cones, no work." He told it at this counter the next morning, laughing. Said the crazy part was the flagger stared at him the whole time, never blinked, eyes like headlamps, and she held him near half an hour, and there was never any slide, never any wreck, nothing on that road that night at all. Everybody had a theory. Merle set the cup down. He went over the guardrail on the gap 11 days later. Dry pavement, no skid marks. Stateman said it was like he just steered for the edge. Merle stood up and put his money on the counter and gave Lena the rest of it at the door, the part the old drivers on that corridor all carry, and none of them explain. "She's not a warning," he said. "She's a scale. Eyes shut, the mountain's taking something else that night, and she's holding you out of its way. Eyes open," and he settled his cap, "she's weighing you." Lena still runs Corbin Gap because freight doesn't care. She's crossed it 200 times since, and there's been no flagger, no cones, only the new gray scar on the cliff face and the guardrail memorials in their sun-faded plastic. But every time, at the summit cut, her stomach lifts a little, and her eyes sweep the dark shoulder, hunting for one small planted figure with a pole sign. Hoping, if it's ever there again. The eyes are shut, and driving, every night of her life, like a woman who knows that somewhere on that mountain, there's a scale with her name on it, and that she's already been weighed once, and passed, and was never told what for. Q. Some loads come with paperwork, and some come with a phone call, and every driver who's been at it long enough has taken one job that felt wrong in the way a warm doorknob feels wrong. Information arriving through the skin ahead of the facts. Odell took his in November, at 61 years old, 39 years behind the wheel, 4 months from retirement. He's the kind of driver this story could only happen to, and by the end, you'll understand why it chose him. Because Odell is convinced it did choose, and I think when you hear how it ends, you'll agree. The call came into his cab through dispatch on a Sunday evening. An add-on pickup, cash rate customer, flexible on time but firm on one point. The load had to be picked up that night. The address was a supply yard at a place called Perry Branch, up a numbered county road in the coal country of eastern Kentucky, and the load was listed as machine parts, palletized, light. Odell was deadheading empty through that exact country, and the money was silly good for the miles, and his dispatcher said the magic words. They asked for somebody local, somebody who knows the old roads. Odell knew the old roads. He'd grown up on them. His father had been a coal man, and his father's brothers, in the years when the hollows up those numbered roads each held a company town, a tipple, a store, a schoolhouse, a few hundred lives running on the seam. He also knew, the way you know things about your own country, that there was nothing up Perry Branch anymore. The mine there had closed in his childhood, and closed the hard way. He remembered his father going quiet whenever it came up, but an address is an address, and dispatch confirmed it twice, and a supply outfit could have moved into any old building up any old hollow. He turned up the county road at midnight. The road was better than it should have been. That was the first strangeness, small and almost pleasant. Where he'd braced for washouts and brush, the gravel ran smooth and graded, and the November woods stood back from it politely. And 4 miles up, exactly where the GPS died and the paper directions took over, his headlights found the yard. It was lit. 2 pole lights burning white over a gravel apron, a long, low warehouse of rust-streaked metal, and a loading dock with its one bay door rolled open onto a glowing interior. A hand-painted sign over the bay, old but legible. Perry Branch Mine Supply, and men waiting on the dock. There were 5 of them, and Odell's first read, swinging the truck around to back in, was that the outfit was poor and proud. Their clothes were work clothes but old-fashioned, heavy canvas and wool, the kind of gear he remembered from his father's photographs. No forklift in sight, which for palletized freight should have been his second strangeness. But the men stood ready in a way that said they knew dock work, and the oldest of them, white-haired, straight-backed, raised one hand to guide him in with the exact economical wave that dock bosses have used since docks began. Odell set the brakes, opened the trailer, and worked the next 40 minutes in the strangest piece of his working life. That's the word he uses, piece. The men loaded by hand, in pairs, wooden crates of a size 2 men could carry, and they worked in a rhythm that never broke and almost never spoke. And when they did speak, low, to each other, the accent put a lump in Odell's throat, because it was his father's accent, the old deep hollow voice, the one the region had been slowly losing his whole life. The crates themselves were old wood, tight-built, stenciled in faded black, and the stencils said things like cap lamps and carbide and number 9, and Odell, a coal man's son, read them and made nothing of them, because your mind at 1 in the morning files what it can and defers the rest. The white-haired boss brought him a clipboard at the end, a single yellow sheet, a delivery address 2 counties over, and a signature line. Odell asked the natural question, "What's the outfit that's receiving?" And the old man looked at him with eyes that were kind and tired in a way Odell had only ever seen in the oldest men of his childhood, and said, "They've been waiting on this order a long time." And then he said the thing that Odell didn't understand until the end. He said, "Your daddy was Harlan Odell's boy, wasn't he? We knew your people. You were the right one to call." Odell pulled out of Perry Branch at 1:45 with a light load and a heavy, settled feeling he had no name for. And he drove the 2 counties through the empty morning and the delivery address resolved, in the gray before dawn, into a place that made him stop the truck in the road. It was a cemetery, a country church cemetery on a hillside, white frame church, iron gate standing open, and a gravel lane running up through the stones, and a man waiting at the gate with a lantern, an actual lantern, who waved him up the lane with the same economical wave. Odell, 40 years of instinct telling him to turn around, and one thing older than instinct telling him not to, eased the truck up a cemetery lane in the almost light, and stopped where the lantern man pointed, and got out, and walked back, and opened his trailer doors. The crates were gone. The trailer stood empty in the dawn, swept clean empty. 53 feet of nothing, except at the very front, against the nose wall, arranged in 2 neat rows with the toes all pointing out. Boots. Old miner's boots, cracked leather, hard-worn, pair after pair set side by side with a care that made his eyes sting before his mind knew why. Odell stood in the cold counting them, and he counted 14 pairs, and the number went through him like a bell, because every child of that county grows up knowing the number 14. The Perry Branch mine closed in 1971 because of the fire on the number 9 seam, and the fire trapped a crew behind a fall, and the company sealed the section with the crew inside, 14 men, and the seal was never opened, and the families buried empty coffins, and Odell's father went quiet at the name Perry Branch for the rest of his life, because 2 of his cousins were on that crew. The lantern man came and stood beside him at the open doors, and looked at the boots, and took off his hat. Behind them, up the hill among the stones, Odell heard the church bell ring once, though the steeple, he saw later, had no bell in it, and when he turned back from looking, the trailer nose held only shadow, and the boots were gone too, and the lantern man said, gently, to the empty trailer, or to Odell, or to the hillside. They're home now. You can go on. There was no paperwork in the end. The yellow sheet from the clipboard, when Odell looked for it in daylight, was a blank page. Dispatch had no record of the add-on, no customer, no cash rate, nothing in the system. And his dispatcher, a woman he'd worked with for a decade, grew so uneasy at his questions that he stopped asking them out loud. The county road to Perry Branch, when he drove it the following week in the honest afternoon, was washed out and brush-choked a mile up, impassable for years by the look of it, and there was no yard, and there were no pole lights, and where the warehouse had stood, there was a concrete pad going back to the forest, and a state historical marker leaning in the weeds. He read the marker. It gave the date of the fire, and the number of the seam, and the number of the men. At the bottom, under the names, it gave the detail that finished him, standing alone in the weeds with his hat in his hands like the old man at the gate in Marrow Hollow, like every mountain man who ever stood before something larger than the day. Never recovered, the marker said. 55 years. Somebody had to carry them out. Odell retired in the spring, on schedule, and he tells this story now at the fuel stop counters, where the old drivers hold court. And he tells it without one tremor of fear, because it's the only story in this video that never once meant its driver any harm. And he knows how lucky that makes him. But he always ends it the same way, with the part that does raise the hair on his arms, even now. The white-haired dock boss, guiding him in. The old accent. We knew your people. You were the right one to call. Somebody up that dead hollow chose him, out of every truck in those mountains, because his blood went back to the seam. And Odell's granddaughter got her CDL last year, 4th generation of that family on those roads. And every time her truck runs the coal counties at night, Odell sits up late by his phone, because the hollows up there are full of unfinished business, older than Perry Branch, and now they have his family's number. TRUE. There's a piece of advice that exists in every mountain culture on Earth, and Appalachia keeps its own version, handed down so long that nobody owns it anymore. If you're alone in the woods at night and something calls your name, don't answer. If it calls in a voice you love, especially don't answer. The old people never explained the rule, which is how you know it's a real one. Explanations are for rules that get broken safely. Travis thought it was porch talk, grandmother noise. He was 34, a flatbed man out of Bristol, raised on those porches and fully graduated from them. And this is the story of the night at the Lick Fork pull-off that put him back on them for good, asking the old people questions in a low voice. And listen to the shape of this one carefully, because unlike the tunnel and unlike the town, the thing at Lick Fork never showed itself at all. It didn't have to. What it did instead is worse, and it's the reason this story goes 5th, because the first 4 got in your eyes, and this one is going to get in your ears. Lick Fork is a wide gravel pull-off on a state route in the far southwest corner of Virginia, a shelf between the road and a creek, backed by a wall of mountain woods. Truckers use it to run out their clocks when the plazas are full. Travis had slept there a dozen times. On a warm night in early June, hours deep into the dark, he was parked there alone, curtains drawn, when a voice woke him. It was his dispatcher, a man named Royce, calling from outside the truck. "Travis, buddy. Hey, Travis. Come take a look at your tandems." Travis surfaced slow, the way you do, and the first thing his waking brain served him was the ordinary explanation that he was dreaming, because Royce worked a phone in a Knoxville office 90 miles away and had never in his life stood in a gravel pull-off at 3 in the morning. But the voice came again, patient, unhurried, from somewhere near the back of the trailer. "Travis, your tandems, buddy. Come look." It was Royce's voice. Understand that. It had Royce's pitch, and Royce's sandpaper, and the little upward hook Royce put on the word buddy. And Travis lay in his bunk with his skin crawling, Because a voice being right is exactly what a phone is for, and a right voice standing in the wrong place at the wrong hour is a category of thing his grandmother had a name for, and his own vocabulary didn't. Then the wrongness sharpened, and he heard it. The thing underneath the rightness. The spacing. Royce talked the way rivers run, fast and crowded. This voice laid its words down like fence posts, each one the same distance from the last, level and clean. Travis, come look at your tandems. Not a request repeated. A recording. Almost. A sentence being operated. He didn't answer. Porch rules, rising up out of childhood on their own. He lay still, and the voice moved. Gravel didn't crunch. Understand. The voice simply came from a new place each time. The back doors, then the passenger side, then low, near the fuel tank, close enough that the speaker would have been crouching against the truck's skin, inches from him through the wall. And it changed. Travis, honey. His mother's voice. His mother, who was alive and well in Bristol and safe asleep. Her exact voice saying, "Travis, honey, come out here and help me." Then, when that got no answer, a pause, a long one, the night bugs roaring on like nothing, and then a small child's voice, right at the driver's door, a voice that hit Travis harder than any of them, though it took him a heartbeat to place it, because you don't expect to be called by a voice you only know from your mother's old camcorder tapes. It was his own, Travis, age 5 or 6, the bright little rasp off the birthday videos, saying, "Level as fence posts. Come out and see. Come out and see. Come out and see." He tells people now, when he tells it at all, that this was the moment he understood the old rule from the inside. The rule isn't, don't answer because it's rude. The rule is, don't answer because the voice is a question, and any reply at all, one word, one knock on the glass, is a yes. Everything it was doing was a hand held out. It could make any sound in the world, and out of everything in the world it was choosing sounds shaped like Travis, fitting keys to him one after another, listening for the click. He lay in his bunk with his hands over his mouth, breathing through his fingers, for what the clock said was 90 minutes, and what his body still insists was one continuous held breath. The voices came in slow rotation. Royce, his mother, the child, once a girlfriend from 15 years gone, each one making its small, reasonable request. Come look, come help, come see. Toward the end, and this is the detail that made an old woman at his grandmother's church grab his wrist when he told it. Toward the end, the voice stopped using words at all, and just said his name, in all the voices, one after another, patiently, the way you'd try the handle of a door you hope is open. You already know he made it to sunrise, because he's the one telling the story. The voices didn't fade, they simply weren't. At some point deep in the last dark, and the June morning came up green and hot and ordinary, and Travis climbed down on legs like dock rope into an empty gravel lot, and found the two things the night had left him. The first was at the tree line, 20 feet from where he'd parked, where the gravel gives out into weeds. The weeds were pressed flat in one patch about the size of a bear, but shaped wrong for one, shaped long, and the flattening had a spiral to it, like something had turned in place there for hours, unhurried, watching one object all night, wearing a nest into its viewing spot. The second he found on his walk around, and it emptied the strength out of him in a way the whole night hadn't managed. Every wheel on the trailer's left side, the side facing the trees, wears 10 lug nuts torqued to 450 foot-pounds by a shotgun. On both left side hubs, every single lug nut had been backed off, by hand, to finger tight. 20 nuts, silent work, hours of it, inches from where he lay. It never wanted him to come out and see his tandems. He understands now. It wanted him to come out. The tandems were just the sentence it had found in Royce's voice. But somewhere in that long night, crouched at his wheels in the dark, patient as arithmetic, it had prepared a second plan, one for the morning, one for a driver who followed the old rules and stayed in the box all night and pulled onto the mountain road at dawn, doing 50 into the curves, with his left wheels held on by habit alone. Don't answer, the old people say, and now Travis says it too, at the counters and the fuel islands, to every young driver who'll hold still for it. But he adds the piece his night taught him, the piece the porches never mentioned, and he makes them repeat it back. Not answering only wins you the night. Do your full walk around at first light, every strap, every lug. Because the thing in the trees at Lick Fork was patient in a way that scared him worse than any voice. It had a plan for either answer. Huh? The last story tonight is the shortest road of the 6 and the longest shadow. It comes from a driver named Boone out of Elkins, West Virginia, and before you hear it, you need to know one true thing about the mountain highways, a thing you've seen yourself if you've ever driven them: the white crosses. Every bad curve in Appalachia grows them, small roadside memorials with plastic flowers gone pale in the sun, names hand-lettered, dates. Drivers pass hundreds of them a year and stop seeing them, the way you stop seeing the layout of your own house. Boone sees every one of them now. He reads every name, every time, at every curve, and by the end of this story, so will you. It was a March night on US 33, the high, lonely stretch through the national forest east of Elkins, fog sitting in the gaps, and Boone was westbound and empty, a little after 2, when his headlights picked out a light on the shoulder ahead. Low, warm, swinging slightly, a lantern, and a man crouched in its glow at the base of the guardrail, working at something white. Boone slowed the way you slow for any human being on a dead highway at night. The man was old, in a gray coat, bareheaded in the cold, and the white thing before him was a cross, a fresh-built roadside cross, raw lumber, planted at the outside of a curve Boone had driven 1,000 times. The man had a small brush in his hand, and a paint pot on the gravel, and he was lettering a name onto the crossbar, slow and careful, by lantern light, at 2 in the morning, in the fog. Grief does strange things at strange hours, and every driver knows it. Boone's first thought was a father, a husband, some poor soul who couldn't do this in daylight with cars going by, and Boone did something he's thanked God for every day since. He stopped. He put his flashers on, rolled down the passenger window, and called across, gentle as he could, "You all right out here, sir? Was there an accident?" The old man didn't startle. He straightened up slow, brush in hand, and looked at Boone with a face the lantern lit from below, deep-lined, calm, and terribly kind, and he said, in the old accent, the fence post accent, the one you've heard twice already tonight, and will now never stop hearing. "Not yet." Boone says the 2 words went into him like cold water into a boot, but slow, so that he was still leaning across the seat, still half smiling the way you do at old men, while his back went to gooseflesh. He asked, meaning it as a joke his voice didn't get told about in time, "What do you mean, not yet?" And the old man turned back to the crossbar and touched his brush to the wood, finishing the last letter of the name with the tenderness of a man signing a family Bible, and he read the name aloud as he finished it. He read a first name, a middle name, and a last name, and Boone's whole body turned to iron in the driver's seat, because it was a name he knew, a name he'd known for 20 years, Wendell Persinger, his friend. His first trainer, an owner-operator out of Buckhannon, 60 years old, a man Boone had eaten 500 meals with, whose kids called him Uncle Boone, and who ran this exact stretch of 33 on his regular Tuesday turn. It was Tuesday night. Boone doesn't remember deciding anything. He remembers his phone in his hand, and Wendell's ring going twice, 3 times, and the old man on the shoulder standing quiet by his lantern, watching him with those kind eyes, making no move to stop him, and that detail, that the man simply watched and waited, is the one Boone turns over at 4 in the morning to this day. Wendell answered on the 4th ring, road noise behind his voice, groggy, annoyed. "Boone, it's 2 in the morning, son." Boone didn't explain. There was no sentence for it. He heard himself say, "Wendell, where are you?" And Wendell said, "Eastbound 33, 20 out of Elkins." And Boone heard his own voice go to Steele and say the words, "Pull over. Right now. Full stop. Flashers. Do it now. I'll explain after." And Wendell, God bless 30 years of friendship, argued for exactly 2 seconds, and then Boone heard the engine note fall and the gravel crunch, and Wendell saying, all right, I'm stopped. Now what in the..." The line filled with light. Boone heard it happen. Heard Wendell's voice stop, heard a horn Doppler past shrieking, heard Wendell's breath, and then Wendell's voice, changed forever, very quiet, saying, "Oh, oh Lord." A pickup, wrong side of the road, no headlights, doing what the state police would later estimate as 90, had crossed the eastbound lane through the exact air Wendell's truck would have been occupying, and gone on into the fog, and was found the next morning in a creek bed 11 miles east, its driver 3 times the limit, and, by some economy of the universe Boone has given up questioning, alive. The trooper's report noted the time of the near miss from Wendell's dashcam, 2:14 a.m. Boone's phone log shows his call to Wendell connected at 2:12. When Boone looked back to the shoulder, and he swears it was within seconds, the shoulder was dark. No lantern, no old man, no paint pot on the gravel. The cross was still there. He got out. On legs he had to instruct one at a time, and walked to it in his headlights, and stood before it in the fog. And this is where Boone's story stops being a rescue and becomes the thing he carries. The cross was old, weathered gray, years of sun in it, lichen on the base, plastic flowers at its foot, bleached to the color of bone. It had been standing there a long, long time, at a curve Boone had driven 1,000 times and never once seen it. And the crossbar, where he had watched an old man paint a name 2 minutes before, where fresh letters should have gleamed wet in his headlights. The crossbar was blank. Smooth, gray, weathered wood, holding no name at all. Holding, Boone understood. Standing alone in the fog with his skin trying to leave his body, a space. A vacancy that had been Wendell's for a few minutes that night, and was Wendell's no longer, and was not, therefore, gone. Just open. Boone told Wendell everything at breakfast, and Wendell, a serious man, drove out with him in daylight, and the two of them stood at the old blank cross a long time without talking, and then Wendell took off his cap, and they left. Neither of them has ever found a record of who put it there or when. The Forest Service has no memory of it. It stands there today. Boone passed it Thursday of last week. Still gray, still blank, still waiting for a name. So here is Boone's rule, the last rule of the night, and he gives it out at the counters with the flat voice of a man handing you something heavy, and I'm going to give it to you the same way, because you drive these roads too, some of you, and the rest of you have somebody who does. If you're ever on a mountain highway in the deep hours, and you see a lantern on the shoulder, and an old man in a gray coat painting a white cross, you stop. You ask nothing. You argue nothing. You listen to the name he reads. And whoever's name it is, whatever hour it is, whatever they say to you when they pick up, you call.